All right, welcome to another edition of Mike Finds Things. I swear we're going to do some collectibles and things that aren't records, but this time I actually did buy more records. I bought some 78 RPM records, so you know they're nice and old. Now, most 78s are completely worthless, but these came from one of those online auctions where it was like an estate auction they do online. There's different companies that do that. Instead of having a real estate sale, they basically do them online. They take pictures. Usually they take terrible pictures, which was the case with this one. This guy, I guess, had owned a folk, like foreign music and square dance label. So generally stuff most people wouldn't be interested in. But he had other records as well. He did have a bunch of LPs. Unfortunately, most of the pictures I could see of the American LPs were like stuff like Perry Como and your typical thrift store fodder that nobody wants. But when I got to the 78s, actually, I looked at the auction again because I was bored because the first time I didn't see anything. I started looking at the 78s, and I noticed in one of the lots, one of the records you could actually make out was on a checker label, and it was Little Walter, so blues harmonica from the early 50s, 78 single. And I looked it up, and that record sells for between 30 and $50. So I said, okay, I'm going to start bidding on this because if there's one blues record, there might be more blues record and other really good stuff, not just your normal big band and vocals and things like that that most people don't want on 78. So I just took a chance. I actually wound up winning that lot for $5, and I actually won three more lots. Total I spent on the lots, including tax and their 15% auction fee was $28, and they were about 25 minutes from my house, or they weren't that far away, so I was able to go and pick them up. And I did go through the one book that had the Little Walter, and there was a lot of good stuff in there, so we're going to be showing you some of that stuff. Most of the other stuff's your typical big band, normal stuff you find on 78. There is some country stuff, so I'm going to have to look up that. I'm not just going to go through the lots like I did with the 45s, because I'm not going to know what a lot of the stuff is. So I'm just going to basically go through them, and then I'm going to do another video, and we're going to get to the meat and potatoes of what's valuable and things like that. So stay tuned for that. Okay, so one of the reasons why I bought all the records is I was really hoping there'd be some of the Victrola records, which were earlier 78s, that were not electronically recorded because it's all acoustic. Basically, this is 1914. This is your portable Victrola, so this is one that's actually made to take around with you. It's almost like your iPod of the day, if you will. Whereas you open this, and the more you open it, the louder it gets. So that's actually your volume control. And this one actually needs to be taken apart and everything cleaned up and relubricated, but it does work. So I'm going to show you how it works. I did find some of the early 78s that will play on this, so in future videos I'll probably be pulling this apart. I don't want to do a how-to video because I've never done one before, and there's plenty of how-to videos on how to rebuild these things. And I'd hate to give people the wrong information for something I've never done. You got your needle here. These needles actually are supposed to be replaced every time you play a record. You're supposed to change the needle again, if you can believe that. This is a needle that's probably been on here for a million years. It's probably played this particular record a million times with the old needle, so this record's pretty destroyed, but it does sort of still play. I'll be ordering some new needles because you can order them online. So I'm just going to show you basically how it works. Even though, so that's your brake. So you put the brake on, you wind her up until it feels like, you don't want to overwind it because it's a spring similar to a clock. Oh, we're scratching the needle. Okay, it's okay. This record's destroyed anyway. So let's see. We'll try to get this to play. There you go. And every Victrola record sounds like the Little Rascals, if you know what I mean. Here it does play. I do have to lubricate it. It does not finish an entire record currently. And I'm going to need new needles, especially since some of the records look like they've never been played or they've hardly been played. So that's a good thing that I found some records for this because my daughter is super excited. I'm guessing this song is not copyrighted because this record's probably from 1910 or 15 or whatever. But these are a lot of fun. I'll open the door so it gets a little louder. So even though this record's completely destroyed, it's on an old needle. You can still hear it. It still has that general sound quality they had back in those days. So without further ado, we're going to go into some of the 78s I did find in yesterday's stash. I'm going to turn this off. Okay. I'll just give you a brief overlook. I mean, this record is really in horrible condition. But this is the one that actually I got with the Victrola. I'm trying to see where the stamp plate is. There's a plate on it that actually says Victor, has the serial number. There it is, right there. And I did decode the serial number, and it came back as a 1914 model. So let's go into the 78. Okay, so first I'm going to go through the 78. This was actually the album that they had opened in the picture. That was the reason why I even bought any of the 78s. And this one contains the little Walter Juke record. These records are from the 1950s or late 40s, so these cannot be played on a Victrola. But I just thought I'd show you the Victrola. Just I think it's kind of neat. And I'll be getting that going. Actually, it seemed to want to play the whole record on that time, so maybe it doesn't even need to be cleaned. But I do need to get some new needles for it to play some of the older records. But this one, this book had basically most of the really good records that were in the whole collection in all those crates, because the guy was really into square dance and stuff that's just generally not worth money. The way 78s work is generally the ones that are worth money are blues, early rock and roll, boogie woogie stuff, generally black artists. Your Glenn Miller, your stuff like that is common. Not really, people are really not as interested into it. People do want them, especially if they have a jukebox that plays 78s. You don't want the hits, but the collectors, the ones that bring the high dollar, generally are ones that are a little less known, and usually blues and stuff like that. So I made notes on all these on Post-it notes. So this was actually a great find. This one's Hurricane by Joe Houston. I've seen this. There's a guy asking $50 for one of these on Discogs. It's sort of a blues boogie, 78. It's in pretty good shape. It's got a little bit of scratching, but it'll definitely play. It'll probably clean up. I haven't tried to clean up any of these yet. And this song is actually from 1950. And we got Big Girl, which these go for between 10 and 20. It's Bop. It's from 1952. This was, I believe, a local LA artist called Howard Rumsey's Lighthouse All Stars. And from what I could tell, they used to perform on like Central Avenue and some of the jazz clubs back then. So generally a really cool historic record. Like I said, that one says between 10 and 20. This one seems to be in okay condition. It'll play. It's not perfect. Now this is the big one. This is the one that was, of all the ones I found, that goes for the most amount of money. I've seen this one online for $100. This is Pachuco Hop by Chuck Higgins on Cabo Records. This was sort of like a local LA song. I guess a lot of local Chicanos really like this. And it's basically an early rock and roll boogie. And like I said, it goes for $100. I saw an autographed copy of one online. The guy wants like $300 for. So, and again, it's in pretty good shape. It's been played. I mean, the thing is, these are great records. These are great dance records. So of course they got played a lot. But that was definitely a great find. We got a 1953 R&B on OK Records. Blue. This is a blues. These go for 15 to 35 on Discogs. It's Cow Cow Blues by Paul Gayton and his orchestra. Now, most of the records, whenever you see and his orchestra, you generally don't even pay attention to them. On the OKs, you want to look. A lot of times they put in his orchestra, even if there wasn't an orchestra. And I know a lot of people see that and just assume it's going to be like another big band. This one's like an early R&B blues record on OK. And this one is Big J. Neely and his orchestra, The Goof. This is another early boogie R&B. This one goes for 15 to 18 on Discogs. And this one is a record from 1952 on a federal label. These are the kind of stuff, I might actually hold on to these, because if I ever get a 78 RPM jukebox, this is exactly the kind of stuff I'd like to have in there. So most of these I might be hanging on to. I might try to sell the more expensive one, since it might be a little pricey to put in a jukebox. The Treniers, Rocking on Sunday Night. So this is an early rhythm and blues rock and roll boogie. These go for 15 to 35. This is on OK. Now you got to remember, most 78s are worth a buck or two, especially your bigger label stuff. Whereas early rock and roll, especially in the 50s, I think I saw online one place said if it's from the 50s, if it's not early rock and roll, they don't want it. So, or rockabilly, stuff like that. This one's definitely a cool find as well. This one is from 1952. This is Hot Ice by Freddie Mitchell Orchestra on Derby. And this one is an R&B bop boogie. This one sells for between $20 and $25. And I mean, like, most of these were dance records, so I think this was sort of somebody's dance collection. Maybe they sold it to the guy that had these. I don't know. This one is a massive mystery. All I could figure out is from 1952. I believe it's a jazz record. It's I'm Gone, Eddie K. This one's not in the greatest shape, but it'll probably play. And like I said, I haven't tried to clean any of these yet. I'm Gone, Eddie K and his orchestra. Now this one's a Mercury label, but it's 8288. Now the 8000 series on Mercury back in the 50s was their race record. So these were your black artists. So this might be a pretty rare record. I could only find one guy that had a 45 copy of this online. There was no video of the audio, or there's nowhere I could find the audio of this record online. I don't have a 78 needle for my turntable right now. I've actually got one on order, so when I get that, I'm going to play this and see what it is. But I believe this is Eddie K and his orchestra, sort of like a jazz. And on the B side, it's Try a Little Tenderness, Eddie K and his orchestra. Vocal by Dodo Green, and Dodo Green was a jazz vocalist, a female jazz vocalist that was more popular in the 60s, but obviously this record's from 52. Now this is the record, this is the one that I saw in the picture that was able to blow up. I saw the Checker label, so I knew we were dealing with an R&B, because Checker was the sister label to Chess Records in Chicago. And this is Little Walter and his Nightcats. It's a blues harmonica. This was actually a #1 on the R&B charts for I believe like 8 weeks is what I saw. It's still, these sell for between $13 and as high as $60 on Discogs. And it's a blues harmonica instrumental. You've probably heard, if you listen to any early blues, you probably know this song. But that's definitely a great find. And obviously, someone for a jukebox, it'd be perfect to have a song called Juke in there. So that's what really made me want to buy these lots. And then once I bought the one lot, I bought the next 378 lots that came after that. Just because I was already driving down there to pick stuff up, and definitely did well. But it's mostly on this lot, this one lot, and this one book in particular, because there were other albums, but they were all just stuff that's not really worth anything. This one is a 1953 R&B. These sell for about $25. This is the Honey Jump by Oscar McLawley and his Honey Jumpers on Modern Records. So that was a good find. Now, this is a good example of how people will put insane prices on eBay. This was from 1953. It's Anna by Silvana Mangiano. This is not R&B. This is the theme music from a movie put out by MGM, so a major label. On eBay, somebody's trying to get $150 for a copy, and on Discogs, it sells for $7. So definitely, I understand that Discogs is not like a big selling place for 78s. So all the 78 collectors haven't migrated over there from what I understand. But it's just a huge price difference. I would say it's probably more towards the $7 range. I was able to play this song on, I believe, YouTube. And it's not R&B or anything like that, so I don't think it's super interesting. This is sort of 1953, Ruby by Richard Heyman, his orchestra. Now this one's a harmonica theme, like movie theme type music, and it's slow, so not dancey. So probably, I couldn't find any prices on this, which probably means that no one's ever bothered to try to sell one, because it probably wouldn't sell for more than a few dollars, would be my guess. And that's the end of this book here. But this is where most of the good stuff. I did find some other good stuff, so we're going to go into that right now. Okay, now I'm going to go through the 78s that were loose that weren't necessarily in the albums. We did have some of the other albums, but a lot of times if you get the albums where it's like a record set, most of those aren't worth anything. I'm sure there are exceptions to that rule. Those generally are the 78s that people really don't want. But I found some good stuff nonetheless. This is a Bob both these are Bob Wills and his Texas Playboys on Columbia, so they're both pretty major label stuff. This one's Blue Bonnet Rag with medley of Spanish waltzes on the backside. So of course it's Western Swing because it's Bob Wills and his Texas Playboys. Of course, you know, very famous country and Western Swing. And this one's Cotton Eye Joe, Bob Wills and his Texas Playboys with Statico Waltz on the other side. Now, these are both from 1947. Since these are so common, these like the high these sell for is like maybe like $10. I'm gonna hang on to these, like I said, just in case I do wind up with a '78 jukebox eventually. I wouldn't mind to have some Bob Wills in there, and these are actually in pretty good condition too. I think he had this because he did have a lot of square dance stuff, which this would fit right in. Those are the only two Bob Wills I found. Here's one from 1944, and this one is, now here's one everyone's going to recognize from, it's the Ink Spots with Ella Fitzgerald on Decca, Cow Cow Boogie. These only sell for about $10. It's I guess it's a super common record. Obviously it is an African-American artist. The Ink Spots, I believe, were like more like a folky group that were African-American. In fact, you'll see their albums in thrift stores a lot of their albums from like the late 50s, 1960s. But with Ella Fitzgerald on the vocals, very jazzy, so something that people would want, especially an Ella Fitzgerald fan, someone that likes 78s, or even somebody who wants to put it in their jukebox. $10, that's what they go for. I might hold on to that because I like Ella Fitzgerald. This is another, I couldn't find the value on this one, so I didn't note it. This one's Western Swing by Adolf Hoffner and his San Antonians. This is also Cotton Eye Joe, just similar to the one Bob Wills. And this one's an instrumental version, so there's no vocals. This one was originally released in 1941 on OK, so this will be a second issue on Columbia. B-side is Paul Jones. Again, a country or Western Swing collector might want that. This also has the original company sleeve on it, which on 78s, people like the old sleeves. In fact, a lot of times the sleeves are worth more than the records on 78s, especially on the more common stuff. Not sure of a value on this one. I'm gonna have to keep checking up on that one. Just still a neat find. I like that old early country and Western Swing stuff. This was actually a pop hit from 1957. Now, when you get into the 50s, the late 50s, there weren't as many 78s made because by then most people had switched over to the 45s and the LPs. So this is Marianne by the Hilltoppers. This was a big hit. I know there was a couple different groups that actually did versions of Marianne that were hits. This one's, you can see, it's a later Dot label. Not sure what this goes for. I didn't really look it up, but this one's good to have. Again, this one's like in pretty exceptional condition for a 78. Looks like it's hardly been played. And this was, all day, all night, Marianne. So it's got kind of like that calypso or Hawaiian rhythm to it. So just kind of a fun record if you've never heard Marianne. I'm more familiar with the other version, but I can't remember who did it. This one actually is from 1927, so this should play even on the Victrola. This one is Prince's Dance Orchestra. Now, this is why you have to check them. This is on Puritan, so it's on a minor label. I've seen them. Somebody's asking $30 for one of these on Discogs. That, of course, that's an asking price. La Golondrina, but I mean, it's a cool vintage label. That little catalog number would probably come off if I actually try, and that's something that I don't know. I guess it's somewhat desirable. I don't know. Like I said, just because someone's asking it doesn't mean they're getting it. Because now this one has sold for $13.75 to $20. Those are actual, like the sold where it says they've actually sold for price. Unfortunately, it has some of these actually had address labels. Now, what's really confusing to me is they have zip codes, which means they're newer address labels. So it would probably be 60s, 70s address label on a record from 1940, because usually when you see address labels on old 50s records, they never have the zip code because they didn't have zip codes then. This is Tuxedo Junction, Andrews Sisters, big hit for the Andrews Sisters, with Rum Boogie on the other side. This is obviously something someone would want for their jukebox, as it's a fairly common Andrews Sisters. Not like a massive collector value. You got to remember, I paid $28 for all these 4 lots of records, so I've come up way ahead of. Especially if I could sell a few of these, I've made my money back and keep all the other stuff. This one is a 1956. This is Stardust. Now, I believe I have this on a 45, if I'm not mistaken. It's Stardust, which is your, like Glenn Miller. I actually have a Glenn Miller Stardust in that crate there. Very common, big band record. This is Eddie Peabody's version. This one's on a banjo. And I believe they did play these on the pop stations back then in 1956. And I believe I've even heard this on like 50s on 5 on Sirius. I've heard that on this version on that station. So it was a pretty big hit. Not necessarily rock and roll, but it's kind of neat to find anything pop from the early 50s, or sorry, from the late 50s on a 78. And we'll check the condition. Unfortunately, it has a catalog number sticker. That looks like it's only been played a few times. A couple scratches. Might be some damage from storage, that sort of thing. But nothing terrible. Most of these were in pretty decent shape. I didn't find that were like destroyed or anything. This one's from 1950. It's a country record. It's Ragtime Annie by Chuck Rogers with Zeke Williams String Band. Now this was neat. Some of these records, this is why I kind of put this one aside. Some of these he had notes, because you got to remember this guy ran a label. He ran a record label that did folk music and stuff like that. Maybe he did a radio show. I don't know. He always had connections, because there were some promo copies, radio station copies of some things. This one has a whole memo. It says the Folk and Square Dance Bulletin. So I'm guessing he put together so it's at Ed Kramer's Folk Shop. I believe the shop was in San Francisco originally, or Oakland, and then eventually he moved down to L.A. But he had notes about the records. So I guess he actually did like a newsletter or a zine, if you will, before zines were a thing, on folk music. So that's probably why he had a lot of this stuff, especially ones that look like they've only were played a couple times. Would be my guess. This is Jingle Bells with the Mistletoe Kiss, so a Christmas record. See, this one's got a label from the Oakland, whatever, Pantalette, so I'm guessing that was a dance group in Oakland, and San Leandro, they're based in San Leandro, California, no zip code. And of course, this is the keynotes. I saw this online for $15. Christmas is good if you have a 78 jukebox and you want Christmas music. I have 45s I've put aside for Christmas to put in my jukebox this Christmas, so I'm sure people who have 78 jukeboxes do the same. This one is Western Swing, $10. So I'm just giving you an example of some of the more common ones I've found. There are a lot of ones that are probably worthless in there, but I don't like to throw anything out, unfortunately, but I need to really research them, and I can just kind of go through them a little bit at a time while I'm watching TV or something. I can't pronounce that. Wade Ray and his Ozark Mountain Boys from 1949 on Capitol, so it's on a major. Plus, it's got the original company sleeve. Let me check that looks like it's been played never. Like a lot of them were just like that. I'm guessing it was for the write-up for his little. He probably got promo copies, for his little bulletin he put out. This is starting into the ones I found that will work on a Victrola. This one's from 1915. So some of these are really old. So this is obviously this record's over 100 years old. The Kohala March. So this one's Hawaiian. Pale Keluna Lua and David K. Kiley of the Irene West Royal Hawaiian. So it's a Hawaiian record from 1915. I think I saw it. Usually the Victrola ones go for between like 5 and 10 at least, because people buy them for their Victrolas. This one's in really nice condition. Now, one thing I found interesting on this record is this is from 1915. It says 75 cents in the USA. And I looked it up. 75 cents in 1915 money is about a little over $20 in today money. And this one doesn't fit in the sleeve very well. I'm going to have to play around with that. I don't want to ruin it. But I'm going to put this over here so I can put it back in safely later on. I'm guessing it's because it's sort of like a thicker shellac than maybe some of the other ones. And but that was like $20. When you think about, that's a lot of money. Like for somebody to buy a record, and you buy the Victrola, and you have to replace the needle every time. So, I mean, you think about today, you can get like an iTunes subscription or a Spotify subscription, about $10 a month to listen to every single song you can think of that's actually in their library, which is quite a bit. I have found stuff that they didn't have, but not a lot. For the most part, they have just about everything, and I'm sure they're adding more. This is the Rosary 1911. So this is a 110-year-old record. A lot of stuff, this is like a religious record, Voice of Love, Serenade. I mean, they're not like rock and roll, obviously, because they're from 1911, but it's nice to find these. So plenty of these. This one I've seen online for $5. It's from 1931, London Mayfair Dance Orchestra. Just to give you an example, I mean, these ones that are early, the early ones that are early enough to play on a Victrola, $5-10 each. Maybe more if there's something rare. But 1926 record. Trying to see if there's anything more they made extra notes on. This one says it's from 1922, and it was actually number 5 on the U.S. charts, and it sells for $5. This is Sweet Indiana Home by Marion Harris and the Isham Jones Orchestra on Brunswick. So that one sells for $5 online, but it's something you could play on a Victrola. That's what So that's one thing that's one good value for me, especially owning a Victrola, is to have records that now I can just use on the Victrola once I get some needles. For Sicilians. Let me see if there's any more that I made any notes on. This one's, I found listed as 1911 and 1912. This one has sold for $5 on Discogs. Under the Double Eagle March. A lot of marches on 78s. Like I said, nothing's setting the world on fire value-wise. This one I thought was neat because this one is from, I believe, from 1906, from what I can tell. And if you look, it's a really early Columbia label, and they wrote something. I don't even know what kind of marker that is. It feels like plastic. On to Victory March, John Philip Sousa, and the Prince's Military Band. This is a really early Columbia. In fact, it says Milan 1906. It says grand prizes. Like I said, the one thing I find online on it is it said 1906. So, and this is like a thick shellac. It's in a bluebird sleeve for some reason, but really early Columbia. I don't know what it's worth. I couldn't find any value on it, but kind of a neat piece of history, something that I can play on the Victrola once I get the new needles in, and hopefully do what thing I need to do to it. And this one was from 1922 on Brunswick. And I believe that was it. So that was kind of the more interesting stuff I find. I did find Glenn Miller, things like that. A lot of square dance stuff. Nothing that like set the world on fire, value wise, other than what was in the book that I showed you at the beginning. But I'll be fine. All right, so that's my video on the lot of 78s that I purchased from an online estate auction the other day. Fortunately, I found some good stuff. I knew good stuff was coming because you got to pay attention on the pictures on those, because as you saw, I was able to see there was that little Waltzer 78 in that one album, and I just had a hunch there'd be other similar R&B, early rock and roll stuff in that book, which there was. Unfortunately, there wasn't in any of the other lots or any of the other books I found. But there was some interesting stuff. I got some records for the Victrola, which my daughter, she turns 12 next week. She's very excited that I found those, because she's been wanting me to get new needles for the Victrola and lubricate it and get it to where it can play like a complete record without stopping. So I'll be doing that, and if any of these are non-copyright, I'll be able to put them on YouTube, so you can hear them as well. As I've got a 78 needle coming from my turntable, which should be here in about a week or two, and I could maybe, some of the songs that aren't copyrighted, I could play them and put them on the channel, so you can hear what that stuff sounds like. So I know that, basically I've done mostly record videos at this point. So give me some of your comments as to your experiences, if you've ever bought 78s or dealt in 78s. I do have a few early rock and roll and doo-wop 78s in my collection. Very few though, because you don't find those very often. I've been kind of holding on to those just in case I ever got a jukebox that played 78s. As all of mine are 45, except for one that plays CDs. But we'll be doing more record videos, and of course I have a video on a traffic light I'll be doing as soon as I get the parts to fix that. I bought a traffic light. I've fixed a couple other ones. I'm going to buy a sequencer off Amazon again, so the light flashes in sequence. And I'll probably do a video on how to install a sequencer on a traffic light, plus show you the cool vintage traffic light I picked up. So Mike Finds Thing is sort of chugging along. It's a new channel here on YouTube, so be sure to subscribe. Be sure to like. Check out my first channel, which is my name, Mike Frankovich. I'll put a link in the description. I do car videos on there, so I just couldn't put videos like this on the car channel or it messes up the algorithm. But I still want to do videos on some of the other things I love, including records and collectibles and jukeboxes and things like that. Well, until next time, I'll be seeing you.